This week, we're joined by Trooper Tracy Lillard from the Illinois State Police, and we will be discussing some of the issues that the police in our state faces and what are goals, what are some of the things that they're doing to address these issues. Trooper Tracy, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's been nice.
Yep. All right, so first up, could you just tell me what are the three biggest issues that the Illinois State Police faces, and what is being done to address these issues?
Sure. So we are seeing speeding has been one of our number one problems with throughout the state, especially in this area here in Central Illinois. Speeding is huge. Distracted driving is a humongous issue that we're trying to really put a lot of our efforts into for enforcement and education on that. And then most recently this year, we've been experiencing issues with people violating the move over law. And that has resulted in 26 of our squad cars being struck this year alone, and was the direct result or the direct cause of 2 of our troopers being killed this year. So we've lost 4 troopers this year, and just to have that is record-breaking in our history. So we want to make sure that we can focus our efforts on correcting that problem.
Okay. In terms of the move over law, I know that is something that is challenging, and you have been doing a lot of public education to get people to understand that once they see a flashing light, they should move over. But it seems as if, I don't know if I can say it this way, that people are still not getting that message. From the police perspective, what else, if there's anything that you think can be done to get people to adhere to this law?
That's a great question. We've been doing enforcement efforts statewide to date, as of today, yesterday's date, because we don't have today's finished, obviously, since it's not the end of the day. But we've issued 5,895 tickets thus far this year. Last year at the same time, we'd only issued 732. So we've done 8 times the amount of enforcement efforts. We do public education in the schools. We do media interviews. We do overhead message boards with the Department of Transportation. And then we utilize social media and public service announcements. Something that I'd like to compare it to would be when the seatbelt law came into effect years ago. It took years and years and years for people to understand the importance of why to adhere to that law and why it's so important. And unfortunately, this has, it's taking time, but I do want to recognize there are so many people that actually do the right thing. It's the ones that aren't that are continuing to be not only written tickets to, but they're causing crashes.
Right.
And the crash, that's just the record, that's just the number of crashes that have involved our squad cars. That's not to count the Department of Transportation vehicles or other police officers, police departments, and then also motorists that are stranded out there. So that law encompasses, I know you mentioned any flashing lights, and it's not just emergency vehicles, it's all vehicles with their hazards on. So we really just want to continue the enforcement and education efforts in that.
So in terms of the officers who are patrolling the streets every day, and they see this continues to happen, how is it impacting them? Is it causing them to be more
vigilant?
Right, and stuff, right? So what effect is it having on them in terms of carrying out their job?
Well, we're going to continue to do our job, whether it's responding to a crash or, writing a ticket or helping a motorist that's stranded. But I think it's made all of our troopers more vigilant, more aware of their surroundings, especially when they're there at the scene. And we make sure that we try to position ourselves the best we can in order for us not to get struck. However, sometimes there's crashes that we need to respond to that are in a bad spot. They're on a curve, they're on the top of a hill. And we just want to notify the drivers that they can move up to the next exit. They can pull up as far as they can. They can pull off the road a little bit further. But I think troopers are getting they're getting frustrated that the people still aren't figuring this out. And we're constantly watching our mirrors. We're watching behind us when we need to be focused on what we're working on the shoulder, whether it be a crash or a subject that's under arrest, and not necessarily worry about traffic. One of the other things that troopers have been doing in order to raise awareness for this is that a trooper might be on a traffic stop. He's with a vehicle. Another trooper will come up and sit behind him. So now there's two sets of lights. Right. And when they do that with two sets of lights, it does two things. One, it alerts motorists behind a little bit further because they can see two sets of lights flashing. But the other thing that it does is if somebody chooses to violate that law, then that second trooper can then peel off and go and stop that driver.
I was thinking that if, like when they're doing these stops, if it would make sense if they like maybe have a cone where they maybe could put like 2 or 3 vehicle spaces behind their vehicle. So if somebody's coming in that direction, even if they would hit the cone first and they might divert. I'm just thinking of maybe something like
people have been sending suggestions about signage, if we could put a signage behind us. But fortunately, we have big bright lights, that are on our car, and a lot of them we've utilized yellow lights, the amber color, which can help alert motorists. But we've had suggestions for the cones and for triangles and signage. But a lot of times, if it's something quick that we need to hop out of the car to check on injuries at a crash, we don't have time to set up those things. And a lot of that we put back responsibility on the driver.
Right.
Is a driver going to see a cone? Because they should be looking for my lights, and we put that responsibility back on that driver that's on the roadway. So I love suggestions that people have. Unfortunately, I think it comes back to driver responsibility.
And this is a good place to digress to speeding.
Sure.
Tell me, what are some of the challenges that the state police are having in terms of persons speeding on our roads?
I don't have any other words other than unbelievable. The speeds that we are seeing out there are just absolutely ridiculous. We have speeds in the 120s, 130 mile an hour. The road speed limit sign says 70 at the highest point at any point in the Illinois area. 70 is the limit, and obviously we want people to. That's ideal. That's the ideal speed on perfect weather day, perfect dry road conditions. However, when we have people that are doubling that speed limit, it puts everybody in danger, not just the speeder that's in the car, but it puts you in danger. Now you're out there with your family driving down the road, and there's people that are traveling at such a rate of speed that you don't have time to maneuver now. Speed is the #1 contributor to fatal crashes in our state. And most likely nationwide, speed is the #1 cause. It continues to be over and over. And the speeds that we're seeing, it's 20. It's just, I just can't understand why people would travel at that rate of speed.
Based on what you're seeing, is there a specific demographic when it like in terms of age that is guilty for this, or it's a wide?
It's wide open. I talked to a police officer the other day, and he said it surprised him that the majority of his high speeders are females, young females, and whether they're traveling back to school, to a university. It might not be a university here in Central Illinois. They might be traveling to another out-of-state university. But the fact that they have that mentality that they're invincible, I used to think that was, the young male might have that speed factor, but we're seeing it across all demographics, all ages, and then obviously both genders. So we see that, and there's not a way to target who we're stopping.
Right.
Obviously, if the car is a mile away and we clock the car at that rate of speed, we don't know any of the specifics of that person until we get them pulled over. Right. So the speeds, and that's a great question, but it's all over the place.
Okay. And again, apart from issuing tickets, and your PR campaigns, whether it's on social media or the regular media channel, is there anything that can be done to get the message to these people that, hey, it's best to reach late than not to reach any at all?
Better late than dead is what we have told people before. I think a lot of times when we do public speaking at a venue, whether it be a school or a business, and we explain to them that the speed in and of itself is not necessarily, it might not necessarily be their speed that kills them. It might be the person that's next to them. So when they're speeding, they now have doubled that chance, and their stopping distance decreases. The rate at which you're traveling, how fast you're traveling, shows how much ground you cover. And if we can educate them, whether, there's different campaigns that we use, but if we can educate them in person and explain to them what happens, then it's almost like they have oh, I didn't realize that, or oh, I didn't realize that's how much ground you cover, and that's what happens.
Some people think that, okay, even though the speed limit is 70 miles per hour, it's okay to go 80.
It's a huge misconception, yes. A lot of people think that they have a window. They have a window like, oh, the cop isn't going to pull me over if I'm only doing 5 over, or 9 over, or 10 over, or 15 over. And when they have that misconception, and so now people that think that I can go 10 over, everyone's traveling at 80. Well, then now everybody's raised their speed, which now increases the chances of death. I got to look at my stats again somewhere. But something I learned long ago was for every 5 miles an hour over the speed limit that you go, you're doubling and tripling your chances of death if a crash happens. And not injury, death. So for every mile an hour over that speed limit that you're traveling at, you increase your chances of dying should your car leave the roadway. So I think if people understood what can happen, the what if. What if you have a flat tire? What if a deer runs out in front of you? I just don't think people grasp that, and they think it's not going to happen to them until it does, and then it's done. It's over, and then the crash has happened. Somebody's died, somebody's been injured, and then they say, well, I didn't realize that's what caused it.
Okay. In terms of numbers,
Yes.
boots on the ground, what is the position of the state police, especially in our area here in District 10 and maybe a little over in District 9? Do you have enough persons to patrol these streets and to make sure that persons are not breaking the laws?
We are working with what we have. Our numbers are down due to people retiring, obviously, and moving to different positions. But the District 10 books right now, we have several more people than we've had in years past for boots on the ground. Coverage-wise, this district here in particular covers 9 counties. That is the equivalent of the size of Connecticut. And so square miles-wise, I think where that comes into play is if a trooper is at a fatal crash and his fellow trooper is helping him at that fatal crash, and now there's a car that has a flat tire 2 counties away, and now there's speeders that are happening on another county, and then everybody says, well, where's all those troopers at? So I don't think they understand how much coverage land-wise that we have. We're not to our full staffing yet, and we haven't been at our full staffing for years. That's the whole state. However, we do have several classes that are coming through the academy right now, and that's fantastic that there's people that are still wanting, but there's a process, obviously, in order to train them, to get them to this area. So boots on the ground, I don't have an actual head count for right now. I believe we were at 1,700 statewide. This particular county, I'm not sure what the head count is because it fluctuates almost daily with people with reassignments and stuff. But I think one of the biggest deterrents that we have is a squad car. So if a squad car is parked on the roadway, whether it be on the interstate or a state road, or even if he's just doing his paperwork, backed into a parking spot, that car in and of itself is a deterrent. That might slow people down. I mean, obviously you're like, yep. Yes, I've seen a car, and then you're like, oh, I got to slow down. we want more. We want more of those. We need people that are willing to sign up and do a job like that. And we want those cars to be a deterrent.
Right.
So.
Right. Let's come back to our area. Are you able to say how many fatal crashes we have in our area this week?
This week we've had 2 that I know of that our state police has handled. Now, city and county numbers are a little bit different. Those will go into the Department of Transportation, and those are kept on track every week. They keep those, or every day at the end of the day. However, I know of 2 that have happened this week alone. One was a single vehicle rollover. The driver was ejected and pronounced deceased at the scene. The other one was a head-on crash with a semi and a passenger vehicle, and that passenger vehicle driver was pronounced deceased on scene as well. Both of those were on state routes. Some of our fatals, something interesting that I think about our fatals within this district, a lot of people have the misconception that most of our fatals happen on the interstate. That is not the case. County roads, city streets, and then as well as state routes are where the majority of the crashes happen. So people might say, oh, I'm going to wear my seatbelt out on the interstate, but I don't need it in town. Or I don't need my seatbelt out on those county roads. I just live down the road. I'm just going down the street. And that's where those fatal crashes are happening. And so there's a lot of contributors to that. They don't have their seatbelt on. They're traveling too fast. A deer runs out and they swerve off the road. So fatals in this particular area are, there's no way for us, we can track that crash once it's happened, right. But then patrol efforts to kind of push forward and say, what are we going to go do to fix this problem? We could go out there all day long for the next week and patrol that road where that crash has happened, but then a crash is going to happen in another area. So it's hard to chase those.
And troopers are normally the first persons to some of these
Right.
crashes. What impact does it have on them seeing all of these fatal crashes?
It's devastating, and a lot of them are so preventable that it's frustrating that you say, oh, I just wish that they would have had their seatbelt on. If they only would have been doing this, if they only would have put their phone down, their phone is still in their hand. It's devastating. And when a trooper gets to a scene like that and they have to not only, they have to put their emotions aside and do their job. And sometimes that's difficult because maybe there's a family member that's there on scene. Maybe there's multiple family members in the same car and one is deceased and the others are still alive and need tending to. It's extremely emotional, but a lot of that, we take that information and then that's how we focus our patrol efforts on trying to make sure that people are doing the right thing. So yeah, it's heavy. Troopers, I've always said, and throughout my career, I've been a trooper for 18 years, and there's no way I can remember the thousands of crashes I've been to in my career, or the hundreds, I guess. I don't know how. I don't keep track, but I'll remember every single fatal I've ever been to. And I don't remember necessarily the day or the color of the car, but I remember the fatal. I remember exactly how everything happened or where the cars were or where the body was. We'll always remember that kind of stuff.
Okay, that's it for me. Is there anything else that you want to add?
Let's see. One of the things that I'd like to add for the speeding coming into the winter months that we're going to be having, the road is going to have just a little layer of ice on it a lot of the mornings when that temperature is below freezing. And I'd like to remind motorists that if you can increase your following distance and then obviously reduce your speed, that will give you more time to slow down, and that the too fast for conditions ticket is still technically a speeding ticket. And so if you're traveling, the road might say 70 miles an hour, but everyone's driving 40 that day because of the road conditions. If you slide into the ditch, that ticket is actually called too fast for conditions, so it's a speeding ticket as well. So in order to avoid sliding into the ditch, just reduce your speed and pay attention, and then obviously give yourself extra travel time during those winter months.
Okay. Trooper Tracy, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right.
You're welcome.